So the day before the primary happened, I noticed most of the general public had no knowledge about the candidates. I saw a lot of people searching for information on those running, as there is no official place to see the details on all the candidates. Since I had been so involved in this election, at least with the sheriff's candidates, I felt obligated to try and help inform people of the candidates and what I had seen from my perspective. So I gave a list of the pros and cons for each candidate. I feel bad having stated the negative because I tried so hard to be positive through this election, but I had to also be honest and thorough, so I was caught in between my personal morals. Ultimately, I just laid it all out as open and honest as possible. I do apologize for the negativity, but I had to address the negatives in order to show the need for the positive solution, from my perspective at least. If there was a public place where we could see the information on all the candidates, I wouldn't have had to do it. We need a public page to see each politician's resume, somewhere we can see in depth their stances and beliefs. We could let the candidates openly speak for themselves and also engage with the public and each other. An open discussion among candidates would be the final touch at giving the general population the most information possible. Since this forum has not been set up yet, I had to break it all down the best I could on my own, from my perspective at least. The following are screenshots from a Facebook post giving that breakdown. Although not my proudest moment for positivity, it was the in-depth information I felt was needed to inform voters. I am open and honest about everything. I post on Facebook more than YouTube, but felt this needed included in the documentary. I did tag all the candidates to my Facebook post, so they had a chance to respond, even though none did. I also included a short video of Brian talking at a debate, which I included here as well. I will also read my posts, so you don't have to read all the screenshots. I ran for sheriff strictly to share ideas I have to help the community. This is my perspective on what I have seen while running. Ultimately, I am worried about things like a dollar collapse, war, or some kind of martial law event where the government tries to gain absolute power. My main goal is to prepare the community for such and to make us as strong as possible locally. As the more prepared we are, the better chance at survival we will have. I also feel the federal government no longer works in we the people's best interest, and gaining our freedoms on a local level is the only logical solution. I'm affiliated with no one, and strictly speak for myself and my experiences. I'm making a list of pros and cons for each sheriff candidate based on what I have seen. I've been very involved in this election, and have went to most of the events and debates. This is my perspective from what I have seen. I even set up an open forum discussion where candidates would sit at a table together and talk about problems and solutions for the community. Only one showed. There is a voting system called rank-based voting, where people list in order which candidates they like the most to least. The candidate with the lowest number wins, so my input will be set up in this manner. Number 1, Brian Butts. This is my number 1 pick for sheriff. I believe he has the courage to stand up to the federal government when I don't think the other candidates will. He has proven this with his track record. He has also been open and honest about being willing to stand up to larger governments, including his response at a debate on the matter. I feel this should be our number 1 concern with the problems we are currently facing in this world. I also set up a sit-down meeting where all the candidates would sit down at a round table and openly discuss problems and solutions they had. This took an immense amount of courage, and even though every active candidate looked me in the eyes and told me they would do it, he was the only candidate who actually showed. I believe this is the epitome of transparency and integrity, as he was willing to stand up for his stances and willing to completely put himself out there. I personally think that we the people should always be in charge, and keeping everything in the open is the most important aspect of politics. He is open about his ideas on public outreach and his plans on how to keep the public involved as much as possible as well. Number 2, Chris Edgar. I like his demeanor, and he seems to have a good heart with good intentions. He has some good ideas on starting a public oversight committee too. He also states that he would stand up to larger governments as well, which I feel is essential. However, he has not been very strong on his stance about standing up to larger governments, and I feel it may just be him telling us what we want to hear. I think if push comes to shove with larger governments, he may buckle. A big part of this feeling is seeing firsthand how friendly he was with Lisa Thomas and how he was working with her on the jet ski bill. I read people's demeanor, and he seemed very friendly, connected, and comfortable talking with Lisa about doing things at a state level. Once again, I am a different person and don't like larger governments in any form. Some may not mind larger governments, whereas I personally always push for absolute local control. Also, at the meet and greets I spoke at, anytime I brought up not paying taxes or having problems with larger governments, he would make faces and shake his head. You can go to my videos and see. I feel this is an indication that he might not be as opposed to larger governments as stated. And finally, when I set up the open forum discussion, I tried very hard to do all I could to include him. He constantly said he would, and me and Brian even tried waiting for him to come in late. But when it came down to it, I don't think he tried as hard as he could have to make it, and was just telling me what I wanted to hear instead of just saying no. Once again, I feel this forum was the epitome of integrity, as we all had the chance to put everything on the table. I want to make it clear at this point that I feel Brian and Chris are the only two candidates that will stand up to larger governments, and who will make a real change around here. Brian much more so than Chris. All the rest of these candidates I feel are much more entrenched in the system and represents the continuance of the way things are currently run. Number 3, Phil Cannon. Phil is a very nice guy. He has been very open and honest with me and seems to have a lot of compassion for people struggling with addiction. He also has some ideas on how to help in this aspect. However, he too had the chance to show up to my open forum and didn't. He said he would, and I planned accordingly, but he was honest and open with me about not being able to make it and kept in contact. I feel this speaks a lot to his honesty, even though he didn't show. At least he responded, and was also honest enough to tell me the truth, which I really appreciate. Ultimately, I do have the feeling he would go with the system and do whatever larger governments demanded. Number 4, Greg Sellers. Even though he originally said he would come to the open forum debates, when I asked him for a second time, he gave me a straight and honest answer and said no. I appreciate the honesty, and he seems like a nice enough guy. However, he seems to be very hard on pushing the drug war. I feel the drug war is failing and needs to be addressed in a different manner, as doing the same thing over is insanity. He was part of a drug task force and seems as though he wants to push and further this agenda and mentality. I feel addiction stems from the dramatic experience in one's life, and throwing people in jail does nothing to solve this problem, as drugs are just as prevalent in prisons. It also seems the system is set up to profit from people's sorrows and struggles, so I'm simply looking for a different way to address this situation, as ripping people from their families and throwing them in a taxpayer-funded prison just for hurting themselves is counterproductive. It seems he will broaden this failed system, which is something I will not ever support. He also seems like he would do whatever larger governments wanted. Number 5, Jimmy Beshears. Jimmy is the current number 2 in command for the sheriff's office. He is the most knowledgeable candidate on how the sheriff's office is run. However, just because someone is knowledgeable does not mean that they are best for the job. Personally, I feel the public should be in charge. So my personal philosophy is to make everything as public as possible and let the public make as many decisions as they can. Also, being in any position of power for a long time leaves the door open for nepotism and corruption. This stands for all offices, on every level. There seems to be many facts and allegations to support this theory. Many people are not happy with the way things are currently being ran. I feel Jimmy would be the continuance of what is currently happening in this manner. I also feel he would do whatever larger governments wanted. He also originally told me he would do the open forum discussion, but when asked again, he said he would need to know the questions and things discussed beforehand. That was the opposite of how the debate was set up, as we would just talk about anything and everything openly, without warning. But I did go ahead and list exactly what my personal problems and solutions would be. After that point, he avoided me like the plague and didn't respond at all when I texted his phone or his Facebook page. He does not seem transparent at all. Number 6, Jeff Bacham. This may seem like a surprise to some. He is a nice enough guy and gets along with people well enough. But he's a major reason why I'm running, and why I've come up with the solutions I've come up with. Years ago, a janitor got caught exposing himself to kids at school, multiple times. The fact it happened more than once means the superintendent knew and allowed it to happen again. There's actually a law that states the super has to tell the authorities when something like this happens. Since the superintendent did not report this, he broke the law. I went to the courthouse to try and get my county police to do something about this, as my kids were in both the schools this happened in. They said the local city had authority in this manner. So I went and asked Jeff Bacham, the chief of police, about this. After much pressure to do something about it, and making it clear to him that the superintendent did in fact break the law, he told me he would have to ask the prosecutor before he could file charges. To me, this is the epitome of nepotism and doing favors for those in power. He would not ask the prosecutor about giving me a speeding ticket if he pulled me over. This did not seem like a fair system to me. I thought about it, and the prosecutor and police have the absolute power to decide on if justice is served or not, leaving the door open for corruption in every city in the United States. Therefore, I came up with an idea for a justice box. It's basically a checks and balances for we the people to ensure justice is always served, and that corruption, nepotism, and qualified immunity is not allowed to happen. We basically allow we the people to decide if there is sufficient evidence that a crime has been committed, and simply introduce the case to be subjected to due process. This way, it would not have the potential to be covered up. I do have all of this on camera, because he openly told me he would talk to the prosecutor before filing charges. I feel he gave certain people privileges that others would not get. Therefore, I put him in this placement. I will be honest and say that it's a personal issue from previous encounters. I'm not trying to throw mud, but just explain why I feel the way I do. Like I said, he seems like a nice enough guy. And although he did originally tell me he would do the open forum discussion, he avoided me constantly and even backed out to spend time with family. I do think family is the most important thing, but I also feel the open forum discussion would have been the most beneficial forum of them all for the public. Number 7, Patrick Cochran. I'm not sure why he is running. He ran for commissioner 4 years ago as well. He doesn't seem to try at all, especially this election. He had zero engagement with the public and has done nothing to stand up for his stances or show his plans on what he intends to do. I thought he wasn't running because organizers of other events said he didn't respond or were short with them. I never was able to talk to him in person, and he wasn't at any of the public events. But I did invite him to the open forum discussion. The only response I got was a crying face emoji. So at least I know he got the invite, even though he didn't respond. I did see that he filed as a constitutional candidate. I'm not sure why he went to that effort when he didn't speak at any of the events that had a chance to, when he would have reached a much broader audience. But since he didn't engage in any way, and doesn't seem to be trying at all, he gets last. I've made a documentary of this entire process. You can check it out at Butterfield Unleashed on YouTube. It will be labeled a sheriff documentary, and will have all the full debates there as well. I'm not a politician, and only want to try and share ideas and be the change I want to see. Instead of just complaining or saying someone else should do something, I created solutions and put myself out there. My ideas may not be perfect, but at least I'm trying to make a positive change instead of just creating more negativity. I've turned over my support to Brian Butts, as I can't technically win. I just want to ensure the best person possible gets elected. After this election, I will be following as a write-in candidate and asking for support in the main election. Since I can't win, every vote for me is nothing more than a message to the federal government. Whoever wins this election will be the new sheriff, no matter what. Ultimately, I think we just need a little more love, compassion, and freedom in this world. Hopefully, at some point, our politicians on all levels will be able to sit down and work together for what is best in the community, instead of just throwing mud and being hateful to each other. For the most part, all of these gentlemen have conducted themselves well, and I thank all of you for having the courage to stand up for what you believe in and trying to make a change. And I really appreciate the community for being so involved and connected. These primaries are more important than most people understand. Hopefully all of our collective engagement gets more voters out there. No matter what, we the people can stand up and make a change locally at any time. So please, above all, get out and vote tomorrow, no matter who you are and who you vote for. Thanks, everyone.
Each candidate will now get a 2-minute closing statement. We will start with Brian Butts.
Thank you, guys. I'm actually not going to give a closing statement, but rather ask something of everyone here tonight and everyone watching, listening. And that is to go back and rewatch the debate, go back and rewatch this forum, and remember back to any time you've seen all of us speaking. And pay attention to the answers that we gave to questions. Not so much what we said, but how we answered the question. Did we answer the question from knowledge and experience with conviction? Or did we read it off of a notebook or give a robotic, rehearsed response? And then I want you to imagine each of us sitting across the desk from a federal agent and determine which one of us do you think would be the most willing and the most effective at telling that federal agent that the only authority they have to operate in Camden County is the authority I give them. Or maybe it's not a federal agent. Maybe it's a news reporter asking for the names and addresses of every concealed carry holder in the county. Which one of us do you think would handle that situation the best? Or a powerful community member who's trying to throw their weight around for a favor to not get you to investigate his buddy. The sad thing is, none of those are fear-mongering. None of those are it can never happen here situations. Every single one of those has happened recently to sheriffs here and in the state of Missouri. We cannot go forward with a sheriff who bends to outside influences. The people of this county and the values of this county and the Constitution and the laws are the only thing that should drive the actions of our sheriff. Thanks, guys.